Hello, and welcome to Roundtable Mindset, the podcast where we seek to understand and share different perspectives in order to grow and challenge our own. And we encourage you, our guests, to do the same.
Each week, we will pick a topic to discuss sharing our own unique thoughts and insights. There will be times when we won't agree, and let's be real, that'll probably be most of the time, and that's okay. We feel it's important to understand that we can live in this polarized world and still respect one another and even be friends. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Roundtable Mindset. As usual, this is Mahlon.
And I'm Jamie.
And today we are going to talk about something that I think, well, Jamie, I know you and I both can relate to because we've been one of these for a very long time, which has something to do with being a parent. So, a lot of fun things going on down that avenue. But I know this week has been kind of busy for me. So, a lot's been going on. Again, with work and personal life. So the last week has just been a blur for me. How has it been for you?
Well, as we're talking about parenting, my daughter turned 19 this week. Yesterday, as a matter of fact. So this week has been a little bit of reflective. I'm not going to lie, a little weepy.
Well, first of all,
they're growing up.
How is she 19? Let's just talk about that for a second. Good grief.
I don't even know. I can't believe they're both 19 and now I'm starting this whole new stage in life. So it's just been a week of reflection and maybe a little bit of avoidance and trying to push it away. I don't know. It's a thing, but
and that's kind of you just ignore the fact that they're 19 now. You're like, no, you're still 12. Be 12, and they're like, seriously, mom.
Well, what I adore about my daughter is that she allows me to do that once in a while. She still values my opinion, so then I can still pretend like I have some sway or say, right? So
yeah, that would be tough. Well, happy birthday to your daughter.
Yes. No, it kind of brought up food for thought for me this week. So both of my kids turned 19 in the last 2 months. And I think the last one was a little bit easier in February. Fast forward to April, and suddenly my daughter decided to take her 19th birthday and her and her boyfriend go on a trip away from me on her birthday. So there wasn't the whole cake and there wasn't the whole what do you want mom to make for dinner and all of that stuff. And so I think it's just really reminded me how life changes and how it's so important for me as an adult to be able to continue this journey, this self-growth journey. I hate the word journey because it totally makes me think of Bachelor.
I was going to say, as you say that, your eyes are literally rolling in the back of your head.
That's because it's a silly phrase, but it reminds me that, thank goodness a good friend of mine several years ago reminded me that someday my kids would be grown and out of my house. And who are you outside of being a mom? And so I'm grateful for projects like this with you and my work and other things that just help keep me growing and learning, because it was a hard day and a super stressful day as I'm like, okay, is she going to be okay driving in the big city and all of these things. And she is currently on her way home, I believe. So it was a fun trip. She told me it was one of her best birthdays ever. But just a little bittersweet for me as we're talking about and thinking about parenting today. So
yeah,
it was good to...
You touched on so many things with that example. I just want to jump in, and I have a feeling we're going to be unpacking some of those in our podcast. But what you did for me is it's a great reminder. It's no surprise between you and I that I said, because you're farther ahead in parenting than I am, meaning both your kids are now 19. They're learning to flap their wings independently of you, leaving the nest, all of those fun things that kids are supposed to do in theory, fun things in theory. And
Yeah,
so
thanks for pouring salt in the wound, my
yeah,
friend.
once you're doubled over, I'm going to kick you a couple times too. So it's just be prepared that. No, but it does allow me a chance to look and say, wow, like you said, your good friend told you one day there's going to be a time when they're going to be independent on their own. And I've heard that myself. I know that myself. My parents have given me that same advice. My wife and I, we've talked about it. But again, it's a far off event that's going to take place. It's something that's in the future that can't touch me today. So why worry about it? And what you're a good reminder of in this example, and your food for thought is that day is coming. And am I prepared for it? And do I have everything that I want to have done with my kids done? So, if nothing else, Jamie, thank you for making me pause and say, am I spending the time that I have with them while they're underneath my roof the best way that I can? And that's always a good thing for me to reflect on. And am I spending enough time with them? So I think after this, when we're done, I think I'm going to take the family out to dinner. So we're all home today. Our schedules align. So uh, your food for thought has impacted me in a lot of ways. So thank you.
That's well, that's so good. Well, because truthfully, I think even when my friend told this to me, I'm like, oh, someday, 3 years down the road, when they're grown up and out of my home, like it was like an exciting thing at the time because teenagers. Hello.
Yeah, my
Um,
mom always said God gives us the teenage years, so we're ready to part ways when they're young adults. Because if they stay
my
cute and cuddly, we would
yes,
never do it.
my best friend said the exact same thing, and I was like, she tells me this while my kids are like 8, 9, and 10, which is like to me was the perfect phase in life when they're like able to do things on their own but still so reliant on me and like seeking my approval and my company. And by the time they're 15 and 16, it's just like, okay, 18's just around the corner, thank goodness. Like,
like like 10 and 11, you're like, you're so adorable. Yes, I will help you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. 15, you're like, are you gonna clean up the counter after yourself? And they give you 3 words a day, which is, huh, no, why?
oh my god.
Yeah, why are you talking to me? Oh, I don't know, because
uh
it's communication. Yes.
everything was, yeah, why are you talking, go away.
And you know what that does for me too is it reminds me of how I treated my parents as a teenager, and it
Oh
makes me
god,
mortified. Just absolutely mortified.
I have apologized, like literally have apologized, because I don't know, kids these days, right? I mean, literally, and it is very different. I do feel like my kids were very different than I was because I feel like I had a healthy, respectful fear of the authority that my parents held, and it was a little bit different with my kiddos. But yeah, I've apologized because I had pretty crappy attitudes
Oh,
too.
Jamie,
So,
remember when we used to watch the Ren and Stimpy show?
oh god,
And they would say, joy, joy. And there was a summer, and I'll never forget this. There was a summer where that was my response to my parents. And they would
uh-huh.
ask me, hey, would you like to go do, would you go do the laundry? And I'd be like, "Ugh, joy, joy. And it was finally about the third time, and my parents literally cleaned my clock. They were like, if we hear that phrase come out of your mouth one more time, and as a parent, and I hear my kids kind of give me some flack sometimes for doing some of those things, it takes me right back to that moment where I'm like, this is my mom said it's the mother's curse, right? She's always said, I wish you have one that acts just like you. And it's powerful because I have 3 of them that act just like me. And so it's
Yep.
like, oh, it just takes me back to that moment, into that one summer in particular where I thought I was just the coolest person. You and I were watching that show. It was I had everything figured out in life, and my parents, how dare they ask me to do one favor around the house because they did so much for me, and to give them that attitude back, I wish I could go back in a time machine and I'd slap the crap out of myself for them.
Oh, yes, the joys of growing older.
And wiser.
I hope.
I hope so too. Because if I look back at myself 10 years from now and think, oh, you're no better than you were when you were a teenager, I might have to do some real, like, deep soul searching at that point.
Although I have to say, I think there might be this universal thing, and I don't know how you feel, but some days, like, even, okay, I have parented I have parented since I was about 23 years old. And so over 20 years of parenting, um, which we'll probably get into that during our little episode here. But um, like why my kids are 19 and I've parented for over 20 years. It's a long story, but um, I've been parenting for 20 years, and I always looked at as an adult, I've always looked at my dad as like this wise, almighty, knowing person, and here I feel like I can't. Like, when do I get to grow up? Like, when do I get to that space where I feel like a grown up? Because I don't always feel that way. You know what I
I
mean? Is
know.
that
I know. It's almost like I strive to be just like my parents, and when does that moment take place? Because they taught me
yes?
so many life lessons. They taught me so many things. They showed me, they prepared me for the world. And here I am feeling like I'm fumbling through this playbook that I'm self-writing, I add, about parenting. And yeah, when do I look back and say, wow, I was just as impactful or as I did this just as well as my parents did it for me? I don't know when that answer is. I don't know, Jamie, if now with your kids being 19, you get to reflect the kind of young adults they're turning into, and that's when you finally start saying, "Oh, yeah, I did do some things right, didn't I?" Or if that will never happen, but I feel your pain because right now, again, I have a 17, a 14, and an 11-year-old, and I feel like I'm still in the thick of things, figuring some of the stuff out day by day.
You are, and you will be for about the next 8 years. So good luck with that.
Now who's
You've
putting
got some
now
time.
who's putting salt on the wound? Thank you. Empty junior empty
Take you while you're
nesting.
down.
Yeah, and I'm going to call you junior empty nester.
Yes, I'm freshly empty nested or something. I don't know. So, yes.
So good food for
Today's
thought.
topic.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So tell us about today's topic. Where did it come from? Where did it go?
Cotton Eye Joe.
We're not going to
Uh,
finish that.
all right, so we're being a little corny today, but today's episode is another listener suggestion. So again, thank you for those individuals that are texting, calling in, leaving a voicemail, reaching out to us through our Facebook. We really appreciate all of the suggestions, and we want to show you, this is why we put this platform into place, is to start having interactions and conversations with people beyond Jamie and I's little world. And so, this topic was a direct request from a listener, and they want us to touch on our different parenting styles and talk through parenting from each of our perspectives. So,
Very cool. Well, and just I guess before we jump in, can I just echo the appreciation for the people that have interacted and brought these topics to us? It's so cool. And just an invitation to the rest of you to not be afraid. Send us a text. It's kind of cool, and it makes us feel like maybe we have something to share. Maybe we can make a difference with this sometimes corny but always fun platform that Malin and I get to share. And we do want to share it with you so much. So um,
and just to add to that, Jamie, in case there's anybody that's curious, it can be 100% anonymous too. So if you text us, we see a number that comes through, but we have no way of knowing who it is. The other two listeners that sent us their suggestions, we have no idea where they're from, who they are. So if you're concerned with that, just know you can be anonymous. Also, if you want to be named, we'll be more than happy to share what other information about yourself that we can. And as we continue down this platform, this is going to be where, if you want to even come on the show and help discuss your point of view, that's going to be an avenue. Again, hopefully, next few months, we'll be able to have that set up. So, all really exciting stuff. I just wanted to kind of put that out there that it can be anonymous if you so choose.
yes, this is an invitation for you to jump on our podcast with us and tell us where we're wrong. Because we're open to that, right, Malin?
We no, we laugh because I think, Jamie, you and I are very. It's comfortable for us to tell each other where we're wrong. But yes, we're both willing to open ourselves up to say we recognize that we don't know everything, even about the topics that we've been talking about so far and we're going to talk about in the future. But we do have our own perspective and our own opinion, and we'd love to share. But we're both open to say, let's hear your perspective, because that's where, again, we've talked about lenses and we've talked about how do we gain or grow our perspectives. This is how we do it, is by hearing from you and hearing your perspective and see the world through your lens. For even if it's just an hour long podcast on a certain topic, it allows us to broaden our horizons, and we're both super eager and excited to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, which is just another way to state for sure, for sure. So,
Which,
okay.
okay, just a second. For sure, which is becoming a fan favorite. I hear that in conversations when I go out to dinner, people that have reached out to us, giving us feedback. So, Jamie, you are the for sure girl, which I know when we first started talking about this, I think both of us kind of wanted to have our own little catchphrase. Super happy that you kind of fell into yours. Also jealous that I don't have one yet. So, just
Well,
what
if it helps at all, the people closest to me make fun of me for it. So, my family and close friends are like, for sure, for sure. Anyway, so parenting styles, parenting through the ages. I am no expert, even though, like I said, mine have both just turned 19 this year. But this is one of my favorite, I guess, one of my favorite things to think about and reflect on. This is something that I've spent a lot of time over the last 20 years learning about and, shifting and so yeah, I'm kind of excited to talk about this a little bit.
Well, and you're
Um,
the resident expert in this conversation, because as you've been parenting for 20 years, I have about 17 and a half years under my belt. So you have me by at least 2.5 years. So,
I suppose, but well, and I'm still not an expert because I still screw it up, like we all do. But I think one of the things I used to say when my kids were younger, and I was way more full of pride, I'm a licensed parent. Like when my kids were younger, I was a licensed foster parent, so I always used to be like, yeah, don't tell me how to do this because I'm a licensed parent, as if that gave me some sort of clout or understanding that I didn't have before. But I have taken a ton of parenting classes, if that's helpful.
so
Um,
Jamie, why don't I would like for you to start. I would like for you to kind of to jump in, kind of like what you're doing. But would you mind starting with maybe giving an overview of how you became a parent? You talked about in the food for thought how you've been parenting for 20 years, however your kids are 19. So just so we can kind of get everybody on the same page, would you mind just giving a quick, up summary update on how you became a parent?
Absolutely. Well, I didn't intend to foster parent. That was never the goal. The goal was to adopt, and so went through the whole licensing process to do that. And I want to say I was 23 years old when we finished that process. I had struggled with infertility and really felt like it was a good way to build my family without, um, just back then. This is such a different attitude, but back then it was like, oh, there's so many kids that need good homes. Why spend money to make a baby when we can adopt a baby, right? And so we went through that process and got licensed and got our first foster placement. And we weren't even licensed yet, actually, when we got our first foster placement. So
Wow.
that was an experiment experience, but um, that was well, and after that first set of kiddos that we had, they learned that we were really good with the tough kids.
So Jamie, what age were
Yeah,
you? I mean, were we talking like early 20s? You were already fostering then?
I was 23 when we
Wow.
got our first foster
Wow.
placement. Yes. Um, and those kiddos were tough. They were tough kiddos. And learned a ton. What I didn't understand getting into foster parenting was the amount of trauma some of these kids have experienced, and not even just like, you know through the nature of why kids are put into foster care, but just the act of removing a child from their active or primary caregiver is traumatic. So, learning to work through that, learning to look at behaviors in a different way and learning to look at parenting in a different way, it was a big, big growth thing for me because I had to learn to parent in ways that I was never parented because we had kiddos with experiences that didn't line up with our experiences in any way, shape, or form. So that was probably where it started. We did, let's see, I fostered until from 23 years old until I want to say I got my kids. My kids came into my home. I think I was 26. I was 26 years old when I got them. So 3 or 4 years of fostering before we were able to, and we didn't know that my kids would be permanent at that time. We were still fostering, but eventually we were able to adopt. They were both in foster care for 3 years before we were able to adopt. And yes, so when you talk about like going through phases of parenting, there's the foster parenting, and then there is the forever parenting, and then there's the parenting young kids and parenting through the teenage years and the shifting that's happened. There's so much just in parenting that you really. I always tell parents that I work with that it's like a toolbox. Like it only works for a short time, and then you better have another tool sharpened and ready to go in your toolbox. Otherwise, you're not going to know what to do. And don't throw the tool away. Just resharpen it and use it again later because it's going to come back around.
So what my unlicensed parenting ear just heard you say, which I agree with, is kids are adaptable, and if you have a skill that you're using that's effective, they will learn to adapt around that. So again, you have to keep putting new things in place to kind of keep them on their toes. But no, part of my statement earlier, to be frank, was calling you the resident expert. Is I know that you bring a wide range of experience and exposure around the parenting, and I'm using air quotes the name parenting because it's so broad. And I wanted you to share. I just wasn't sure how much of that you would share. So thank you for that, Jamie. Because again, just a level set on my end, my wife and I, and I don't know I don't want to be offensive, Jamie. So if this is offensive, let me know. But like we were more of a traditional route of having children. And so we didn't have to think about, infertility issues or adoption or fostering. So, you know, although I think our parenting experiences have maybe started off differently, I think the actual journey, I'm using air quotes, of parenting is probably around the same. It's just I love hearing how you became a parent because it's so foreign to how I became a parent, and it's rich with a lot of things I never even thought about you have to take into account as being a parent, and one that I never have to take into account because that's not where our parenting journey started. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's cool how we got to experience. I got to experience parenting all ages of kids before we gained permanency with my children. So I had a small glimpse of what it would be like to parent teenagers. I had a small glimpse of what it would have been like to parent them as babies. It's such a rich way, um, such a rich way to build a family and to build a set of experiences that many people don't get. So I'm always grateful for that time. Although I will tell you, the day that the final adoption was done, the best thing I ever got to do was look at the social worker and say, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. Never call me again." So we were finished at that point, but it was good to live through some of those things and learn and grow through some of those things. So
Yeah, so one of the questions that come to my mind, Jamie, that I guess I'll just dive in because now my mind is just bubbling with questions, things that again I never had to experience as a parent because again traditional route, you go to the hospital, you have the baby, you bring the baby home. The beginning and the all starts within my wife and I. For you, can you talk about when your kids came into your house? How old were they? The, were
the
they
first time, yep, when they first came to us, they were 3. So my son came to us with his younger sibling, who eventually was able to go and live with her biological dad. My daughter came to us just a few months later, also 3 years old. Um, but she did go home for a little while before she came back later on. So um, they both entered. I want to say they both entered the foster care system when they were 2 or 3, and then adoption didn't happen until they were 6. So they spent 3 years in foster care before permanency was able to take place.
So, and that's going to be right where my questions begin, which is, how do you have children that come into your home that already have some exposure to a parenting style that's not yours? Again, they bring experiences, they bring sometimes, in some cases, trauma with them. So, how do you start? I don't want to say deprogramming that, but how do you start getting your parenting style in there and having them start, adapting to that? That seems like that could be kind of a hard transition.
Well, and it's not even about like, deprogramming or adapting to my parenting style as much as it was like building trust. I really had to start at the beginning for them to understand that when I say I will do something, it means I will do it. That you can trust me to take care of your needs. You can trust me to be there when it's time to get out of school. You can trust me because I was a complete stranger. Like sometimes it blows my mind to think back at how scary that must have been for a 3 year old to be like, oh, hi, complete stranger who I've never seen before in my life. Now you're my new mommy. Like, what the heck? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it really had to start basic and really just building that trust. And it's interesting, the two kiddos that I have, my two kids, they're so very, very different. My son was like, I often describe him as like the the Energizer Bunny whose battery never died. I mean, he was just go, go, go all the time. Super energetic, super loud. This child, when he laughed, it encompassed his entire body. Like he was a big presence in the room. And my daughter was like this quiet bookworm. And she would sit on the couch with like saucers for eyes as she would watch my son and his little sister just play and be loud and boisterous. And so I had only had, like I said, they found out that I had a knack with the tough kids. Um, Even when I did daycare, like the naughty little boys were always my favorite because I just felt like they just needed extra love, right? Um, so they found out that this was kind of my MO, and that was kind of the kids they sent my way were those tougher kids. So when I got my daughter and she was not a tough kid, that was really hard for me to adjust parenting with her because my son and his little sister really needed some firm, consistent boundaries. And my daughter, she shrank in that and really, really just withered with that kind of approach. So I really had to learn fast how to adjust to that and give her what she needed in parenting too.
So,
I wish I had been good at it. I mean, I really did fail in so many ways, but thankfully, kids are resilient and give us lots and lots of chances to get it
well,
right.
amen for that. So, one of the things that you said that, as I'm trying to find commonalities, right? Because again, surface level, we're both parents. Surface
Mhm.
level, we've both been parents roughly the same amount of time. But when you start getting into those different situations, vastly different. How these kids came into our lives, vastly different. So I'm trying to find commonalities. And one of the commonalities I just found, which you stated, I thought really well, is, you know, our kids are also very different from one another. So our daughter was night and day difference than our middle son and our youngest son, obviously all three of them. So it's really great to hear you say how you were used to maybe, I'll call them the naughty kids that you're really good with. You're prepared to parent in a certain way, but then your daughter comes along and shatters that because that's not how she responds. That's not how she, I think you used the word withered. I mean, she's not thriving in that environment because she's not used to it. She doesn't like it. She doesn't respond to it, whatever it is. And so I think that's very interesting because that's the same types of styling that my wife and I have to do, right? My daughter, she came home with us. She's in a past episode, I think I called it, the atmosphere of the home or the environment that you're creating. And when you bring that other child into it, traditionally when they're a baby, they kind of just fold in. But then as their personality grows and shifts and becomes more prominent, they start pushing on that environment and changing it because they don't respond as the same way as, my middle son didn't respond the same way my daughter did. So it's really fascinating to hear that's exactly what you had to do, but I get a sense you had to do it a lot faster than what my wife and I had to do because you didn't have the time or the runway that we did.
Right, right. Well, and actually something as you're talking about that, something that made me think of a past conversation. You had talked about one time that like you and your wife were by the book parents,
Oh,
right?
we were total book
Um
parents. I mean, that's how we had no experience. We didn't get a license from anybody for parenting. We just jumped right in. And so I it's so funny because when we were in the hospital, I even joked with the nurse. I'm like, "Oh, where's the instructions for this baby?" And she looked right at me with serious eyes and she's like, "There is no instructions." I'm like, "Okay, I need someone to laugh because this is a life-changing event that just happened and I have no idea what I'm doing and you're giving me a life to take home. Like I just need someone to just make this fun for just a second." But that's all we had, Jamie. I mean, we had our parents that we could go and ask questions, but we dove right into books because it gave us a sense of control and it gave us a source of knowledge that we didn't have.
Mhm. Well, and something that I didn't have as a parent was 9 months to prepare. You know what I mean? Like I I mean I knew I was going through the licensing process, we were doing all the things, but we didn't know when that was going to happen. I didn't know for sure. Not only that, but I didn't know what age, what gender, anything. Like I didn't have any idea what we were actually expecting because the call can come at any time. And it could be anybody. It could be any age kiddo. So it's not like I could make sure I had a crib and a bed and like and a playpen and all of those
Or
things. It really
even what color to put on the wall.
right. Exactly. Exactly. We learned real fast. Beige is good. Um
Be- Beige
but
is your friend.
taupe is a very soothing color. Um but like literally I had when they called me for that first set of kiddos, I want to say it was like 10 or 11 in the morning. And they said that it could be any time between 8 and midnight that night. So, like, I had no clothes. I had no beds because they literally told us in our classes, don't go buy beds. Like, don't go buy a whole bunch of stuff because you have no idea when that first call is going to come. Well, that first call came before we were even done with class. And so we're like, okay. And those poor kids slept on the couch the first night because I was like, I don't have any beds. Like we didn't know this was happening. And then to think too, like the little boy was, one of them was 3 years old, and I didn't have enough understanding at that time. I went and bought like sippy cups and like pull ups because I'm like, well, the kid probably like. The kid was drinking out of cups and wearing underwear. It's not like I had to have those things, but I was just
Well,
like preparing for anything. You know what I mean?
right. Because again, I think you're reacting the same way Kim and I would react, right? Like we don't know. I mean, if a pregnancy didn't last 9 months but lasted 9 hours, we would be in the same boat. Like, what do we do?
Right.
So you had to take those 9 months of preparation and condense them into 9 hours. It's like,
Squish.
yeah, and so I mean, that is as you're talking, I'm sitting here just marveled because that is something I would say I took for granted. The
Yeah.
process for us to have children is well defined. It was
Yeah.
9 months. It was waiting. It was preparation. It was painting walls. It was buying cribs, stocking up on diapers a little bit at a time just so you have a good surplus. You're blowing my mind in the fact that the what took us 9-10 months to get organized, and even then I felt like I wasn't ready. You had to accelerate through in hours.
Well, and let's just talk a minute for the meal plan that I had for the week that week. That had to shift real fast too.
How do you
Like
even know what
there
how
is
do you even know what they want to eat?
oh, exactly. Like that was probably one of the hardest shifts that I had to figure out was like I always had on hand one of those super kid friendly meals that almost any kid will eat, like mac and cheese and chicken Spicy chicken nugs. Saucy chicken bits. No,
Sa-
just regular chicken
Saucy
nuggets.
chicken bits. I bet you didn't shake the container violently, did you?
No, but I would have been. It probably would have been more fun for the kids for sure. But, um, but just like I have things like just normal adult food planned for the entire week, and just for one, and then suddenly it's me and two kids, and I have no idea what they like. I have no idea, like, and not only that, but they're also transitioning into a complete stranger's home. So like they don't want to eat very much because they're like, "What is this?" Right? It was, yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was a quite an experience for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just marveled on the sheer speed in which you had to just be prepared. And again, be prepared as well as you could because there was no way for you to go and get beds and set up rooms and and know exactly what they want to eat and make sure the fridge is stocked. I mean, you said it earlier, you were just working on having how do these kids start even trusting you or feeling, let's not even go to trust yet. How do they start feeling comfortable enough with you that they can start relaxing so they can start being their true, their true selves, their personalities come through? Because don't know about you, but I know when my kids and myself, when I'm put into a situation that's unfamiliar, I'm a little bit more reserved until I get the lay of the land and my surroundings, and then I allow my personality to really kind of come out full force. So I can only imagine that in your situation, that's the same thing. And I mean, not even to say I need them to trust me yet, but how do you even get them to be relaxed enough to be who they are in front of you?
right. Well, in the foster care world, we call that the honeymoon period. So that first 2 to 3 weeks was the honeymoon period. And then after that, you know that you're doing a good job when they let all of the things out on you. That's how you know you've built some trust. But I didn't know that for a long time. So,
So again, as we continue through our conversation, because I think there's so many things we're different on in this topic just
mhm,
because of our experiences. So I'm curious, not that I want this to be come across weird by any means, but when you say they let things out, and let's say they start misbehaving and they start having those tantrums or whatever that's they're doing, when you have to correct them, let's touch on discipline because I think that's it would be very interesting because from my perspective, we're not above timeouts, we're not above taking some things away, and in really horrible cases, we have even spanked just because it's either the action has warranted it or the other previous actions didn't take, didn't stick with them and they kept their behavior up. Is that different or was that different for you? Or can you touch on that? Because that's where my mind, I would be like, how do you start implementing discipline and still having them realize that's a form of love? Does that make
mhm,
sense?
absolutely. Well, and I do think there's rules. There's rules around foster parenting. There is no spanking. You are not allowed to spank kids when they're in foster care because you don't know what experiences that they've had before you and what that might have been. And so I think the one thing that I wish I could go back, like I wish I did know then what I know now. I was really good at setting clear and consistent expectations. That I was good at. Following through with those clear and consistent expectations, I was pretty good at that. If you do this, you will have a timeout. As I grew a little bit in parenting it, then I started using more natural consequences. So I quit using timeout with some of the older kids and started using things like, okay, well, if you choose to throw your food on the floor, naturally you have to clean up after yourself. So you can just stay here until you get that cleaned up because you made that mess, right? So I used some of those natural consequences. It wasn't until my kids, my beautiful, beautiful babies, were like in middle school or late middle school that I probably had the biggest shift in parenting. I went from a very super nanny style parenting that is not acceptable,
I
right?
remember Super Nanny.
Oh, she was amazing. And it was so good because truly Most of the kiddos that I had in my home that had some of those big behaviors, it was because they needed consistency. They needed clear, consistent expectations and consequences. And so it worked really well for them. I feel like that is one of the biggest tools that I needed to have in my toolbox. What I wish I would have had is the I don't know if I could like classify it, but I took Circle of Security parenting course. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
So, like I said, I've taken so many parenting classes because of my jobs, because of being a foster parent, just because I'm a nerd like that and enjoy learning through like parenting courses and curriculum. But that is probably the one that I still use when my kids are 19 years old. I still use Circle Security Parenting because it's so
Can you say
much
that
just
again?
about, yep, it's Circle of Security Parenting. And it's something, it's really about connection. It's really about building a secure base for kiddos and secure attachment. It's not like attachment parenting because I think that's a whole different thing. I don't know enough about attachment parenting to speak about it, I guess, but really building that secure foundation of attachment and connection with your kiddos. And it's so relevant because it's not just babies. It's not just toddlers, but it's your teenagers, it's your adult children, it's your personal relationships, you know what I mean? So that's the one thing. I wish I'd had some of those skills when my kids were younger because then it wouldn't have been it's like those consistent expectations and consequences were the main focus when really it was the connection that should have been the main focus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what I'm putting together here is I think we shared a lot of the same similar approaches to discipline. Although I think you have a lot better and fancier names for some of them. I think naturally that's stuff that we're doing, but I've never heard those terms because again, I never had to learn those terms.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that some of those things that you're learning in parenting classes are some of the same things that we're already doing or a variation of it. And if not, that's what I appreciate in our conversations is some of those things that you have learned about parenting, something new, different concepts, things that I don't I don't look for outside of the way my wife and I parent is very
Mhm.
helpful and very useful. So that's one thing that's different for me is yes, my wife and I we were book parents. We took that base of knowledge and then we started shaping how we were going to parent our own children because you fold in not only technique but you pull in the culture that we were creating, our belief structure that we want our kids to also follow and learn from. And it's just there's so many things that go into parenting. So when you have those names, I might not know what they are off from that alone, but I'm hoping that a lot of those styles are studied from parents, or that maybe we even have some of those naturally occurring. And when we don't, I like to dive in a little bit more to find out what exactly is that, because if I can benefit from some of the book knowledge that you or anybody else or classes that you've taken, that I love it. So thank you for always sharing those new titles and techniques and things that I have never heard of and never really had to think about or worry about because of
Yeah.
how we became parents.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, the goal is to really boil down what is it that what is our goal? What is our overarching at the end of the day? What is it that we want our kids to come away from our parenting with, right? And
For me, it's I
for
was right.
me,
No, just kidding. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that could naturally happen. But for me, I was really like, what I had hoped would happen is that someday when my kids were in trouble, that they would feel safe to come back to me, right? That they would know that they had a safe haven, that they had a safety net in me, and that they could trust that they could come back and talk to me about what they were struggling with, and to know that I would help them if I could, and that they would find that unconditional safe love in their mom if they didn't feel they had it anywhere else. And the way I was parenting, especially that early teenage, that transition, I swear to goodness, that transition between like late grade school, early middle school into like the first couple years of high school, that was a hard shift for me Because before then, it was like, "Hey, go clean your room." "Okay, mom." And then when they suddenly had their own like thoughts, opinions, and decisions to make, and they weren't making it my way, we had some real friction in that. You know what I mean?
Ah, now you're talking about the heart of parenting. Working through the friction with children.
Yes. Well, and I think it's because no one really explained to me that that was a change, that my approach to my kids really had to change from fostering this, oh, good kid, thanks for doing what you were told, to, okay, now you have some choices, and how are you going to explore those choices? And how are you going to make the choice that works best for you? And how are you going to deal with the consequences of those choices? Like, it never really made, like, it never clicked for me, I guess, that that was a shift in parenting, not just a shift in me as a kid, because I remember that shift. But I also remember that my parents were super supportive of that shift, when I was free thinking, when I became a free thinking individual, right? So that was once we could make the, once I could make that shift, make that change in parenting, that's where I started to think, oh my gosh. And as a matter of fact, some people close to us and some helpers, like professional helpers that we had, flat out told me, like, if you keep going the way you're going to drive them straight out the door. You're going to drive them straight away from you, and they're going to go to somebody else for help, because you're not a safe person if you can't shift with them. And that's where, like, that parenting class, that's why I say it's the one I use the most, because that's where I learned those skills to say, okay, what does my kid need, and how can I be there and support their growth in that? They're going to fall. I just didn't want them to fall hard enough to break an arm, right? Like,
Well, and it's so funny that you're saying that because again, my oldest is 17, and so without actually stopping and thinking about the technical terms that you are, that's exactly what my wife and I had to do. We had to learn that when we have a baby, and their needs of a baby is drastically different than that of a toddler, and even more so when they become a teenager. Well, one of the things that we've recently been talking about is how do we teach our children? And we started at a very young age because, as you've kind of alluded to, I think my parents really raised me to be a free thinker. Follow the rules, follow their rules, but also don't just take things at face value. Think through things, and that was one of the skills, one of the life skills that my wife and I, wanted to give our children. Well, as my teenage daughter is just wrapping up high school, starting to look at colleges, testing out those wings every so often, flapping them. We're trying to build in moments when she comes to us and say, "Hey, what should I do here?" We turn it around on her and say, "What do you think you should do?" And what we called it is, the last year or so, we really want her kind of to make those decisions, and we've told her, good or bad, you have to live with the consequences of your decisions, and you can sometimes make a good decision with all the information that you have. You can clearly see that this is the path you need to go, and sometimes even with all the information, it's not 100% clear, so you just got to make a choice, a decision, and sometimes that's not the best choice. And how you learn from those situations is really more important than making the decisions themselves. But we've said many times now, we kind of want her to fall down and skin her knees and get a boo boo, metaphorically speaking, so we can come alongside her and say, okay, how do you pick yourself back up? How do you say that was painful? I don't want to experience that again. I need to avoid that in the future, and help her through those rather than just making all the decisions for her. So then when she's out in the real world and mom and dad's not around, she's not equipped to either make decisions, or when something bad does happen, she doesn't even know where to begin. So I think that's another similarity between our parenting, is that I think that naturally is taking place because you have to recognize your kids' needs change as they get older. The support that they need is different. And even what they need from you is different. None of my kids need me to make them breakfast anymore. None of them need me to help them bathe or, get them into bed or tuck them in. It's nice when those moments still happen, like tucking in the bed, not the bath or anything, or when we make a meal. But you have to recognize that that shift is taking place, and to your point, you have to adapt to it. Otherwise, what good is my parenting to them as they age if I'm only going to use the methods that I discovered or the tools that I sharpened when they were younger and are no longer applicable? Then that makes me an obsolete parent.
Well, and I think I had a hard time letting go of those tools that were so effective when they were younger. It was really difficult for me to see that those weren't appropriate tools anymore. That, grounding really, I don't know about you, but grounding did nothing for my teenagers other than make me responsible for making sure that they stayed grounded, right? Like
Can I
it was not, huh?
okay, can I just share one thing that's so funny that you brought up?
Yes.
So when we again, my daughter, right? When it was one of the first times we're like, okay, you're in trouble, you're grounded, you need to go to your room and then, think about what you're doing. And it suddenly washed over us. That's where her video game station is. That's where her music's at. At the time, I think she just had gotten a phone. Maybe it was pre-phone, but let's just pretend like her phone. So it's like, what did we really sentence her to? Time out with all of her favorite things. So we had to learn to grounding itself was not always effective, but grounding away from certain items, like now her phone. If I would ground her from her phone, that would have a big impact, right? Even now at 17, she'd be like, "What do you mean?" So we had to learn that really quick. That and I'm not a. I hope my wife doesn't kill me, but there was times when we grounded them to the laundry room because why are you going to go to your bedroom and have all the fun? Go sit in the laundry room for like 45 minutes, right? Like there's nothing to do there except if you want to do laundry, go for it. And
There
we laugh about that kind of like you are, but it was effective because they didn't want to stay in the laundry room. So
absolutely,
sorry.
absolutely. No, well, and finding those things that are meaningful. And the problem is that the older they get, the more meaningful those consequences are because they're real, right? I mean, they make decisions now, in the last and I've been able to. So 19 is a big deal because in my state 19 is the age of majority, right? So that's when as young people we are considered adults and we're able to sign contracts and do all that stuff. So this last year has been kind of like it's like training wheels for parenting adults. Like, this is what this might seem like. I still have the final say when it comes to like medical and all of that stuff. But, to be able to start letting some of those things go and letting them experience their consequences and that is something I'm so grateful. And here's what I will say. If I were to give parenting advice, here's what I would say. Get you a friend who has been there before you. Like have a friend who has kids that are older than your kids because they are going to be learning and you're going to be watching and they're going to be teaching. And that was probably the most effective thing I did for myself was to have people and parents around me that had parented these stages before me. I I have nothing but them to thank for this.
Well,
Like,
and you and I have talked about that too. Like I'm learning from watching how you're parenting your now 19-year-old kids, right? How you transitioned from them being completely dependent on you to now you're helping them make decisions because not because you're forcing your will on them, but because they want your opinion because you've built that. We have another set of friends, and my wife and I have another set of friends who we're watching them. Their daughter is in college and they've transitioned the same way. And so it's like, let us learn from it. Let us learn from what you've experienced and all the things that you've done and maybe didn't work out so well for no other reason than to just highlight the fact that okay, this is something that worked. Doesn't mean it will work for my kids, but it gives me a different tool to start looking at sooner, which I so appreciate.
no, I think the one thing that I guess the last little piece, I can't say that I subscribe to any specific parenting technique, right? Because I really feel like I have had to take tools and tricks and tips from all kinds of different places. I could give you, for instance, the parenting book that probably helped me the most was called Have a New Kid by Friday by Dr. Kevin Lehman. Um, really taught me the art of those natural consequences, right? And delayed gratification, because how often do we as parents go in and say, you did this, 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 and this? Well, his idea is you wait until they come and ask you for something, and then all of a sudden they're teachable. So instead of it being want, 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 well, why won't you take me to the mall? Ah, well, because the other day when I asked you to empty the dishwasher, I ended up having to do it. So I don't really think I'm not going to go do something extra for you if you can't do the things that I ask you to do at the house, right? Gold, like it changed the way we parented at my house.
And I'd like to
Um,
bottle that up and kind of condense that to say, no. Why? Because I said so. But anyways, you do you. No, just kidding.
well, and that because I said so doesn't super help in the parenting realm. Especially after, okay, maybe it does until they're like 6, but after that, they're like, doesn't mean anything, right? Um, and I think the last bit that helped me the most in shifting my parenting, and this one applied all through parenting. But I was at a training for my current job. I work with parents who have kids with behavioral and mental health challenges, and so part of my job as a parent peer support specialist is to help them cope with the behaviors, but also help them build strategies around that. So we were at this training, and the guy at our training said all behavior is the expression of an unmet need. And he said if you can stop and figure out what it is the underlying need is behind the behavior, then you can go meet the need, and that shifts the behavior. And I was like, okay, not all behavior. There's no way it's all behavior, right? So we start having this conversation at the training, and literally he had an unmet need, possible unmet need for every behavior we could give him. And it was like, okay, okay. So if I stop and look at that behavior just a little bit differently and figure out what it is that the kid is trying to explain to me or what they're trying to express to me, it helps me figure out how to meet the need. And then it eliminates the behavior because the need is gone.
Well, and one thing to that I like, again, we've spent, the last few minutes kind of talking about that from a lens of a child. But look what that does for the parent, because I can't tell you how many times frustration builds as a parent because you have a kid that's acting a certain way or wanting something or demanding, and you're working through that friction. And it's very easy to just lose sight of what you just mentioned and just respond out of frustration, emotion, and to really take that step back to say, okay, if there's an underlying need that's not being met here, what is it? It gives me another way to channel that frustration and try to figure something out. Because I tell you what, there's times when you're tired from a whole day's worth of work, or you're not feeling very well, or you have other pressures of life on you, and your kid comes to you, even with a whiny tone, or even asking for something, and you give them an answer, and then the whys happen, right? Like, why can I do this? It's so unfair. I think just keeping that in the back of your mind and saying, okay, even with something as superficial as I want a new video game, and then the response to that, well, what is it really that we're talking about here? I think would be helpful. But man, I tell you what, all of the things that we've talked about, I don't think we could, if you could find a solution for the times as a parent that I responded when I shouldn't have responded, or
Mhm.
maybe had nothing to do with what my kid is trying to talk to me about, but had everything to do with my day or what happened in my day. If you could find a way to stop that from happening, you would be a billionaire. Because as I reflect on my parenting, those opportunities or those situations are just filled with regret and things I wish I could have gone back in time and did that a little bit differently. And just to be able to prevent as many of those from happening would be really, really great. But I don't know how you do that.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I was hoping to end with a small illustration today, if you're okay with that. Um, I have this story. It was kind of like the day that I figured that out. Like, how do I not overreact, or how do I not react to what I'm seeing and try to react to what the need is behind the behavior, right? So I think I want to say the kids were like 5 or 6, right? And I've mentioned on here before that I have an ex-husband. Okay. So the group, our whole family, was going to the lake, and we went swimming. We decided to keep the shoes and socks off until we got all the way back to the vehicle, and because hoping that their feet would dry off, right, and some of the sand would come off. So we get back to the vehicle and set the kids on the curb there to brush off their feet and get their socks on. Well, the ex was pulling out my son's socks, and he pulled out one, two, three, four pairs of socks. This is July, okay? And he was like instantly angry. And he's like, I just did laundry, da, 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 da. And he was really frustrated that he had five. And I'm only thinking it was five. It could be a seven. I mean, it could have been a lot of
There was
socks.
a
It
lot
was
of
just a lot of
socks. A lot of
socks.
socks.
Lot of socks, right? And I'm sitting there, and as he's pulling these socks out of his shoes, you want to know what I saw? I saw Darth Vader. I saw Superman. I saw Batman. I saw X-Men. I saw Spock. I saw, and I just, for this split second, I was blessed with the ability to imagine my son in front of his sock drawer, my 6 year old kid in front of his sock drawer, thinking, oh, but I really want to wear Darth Vader today. Oh, but here's Batman. Oh, but what about, I can't forget Superman. And I just imagined him like, I can't leave any of them behind. And so he put all the socks on because they were all his superheroes, right? And it was in that moment when I stopped to think, if I could look at this situation through a different lens, if I could just take a second to think about it in the way that maybe my kid is thinking about it might help me slow that reaction down and change and shift the way that I looked at that. Because I just started laughing. I mean, the ex was really frustrated because he did do the laundry most often, and that would be frustrating. But just to imagine my sweet boy, in front of his sock drawer, trying to not leave anybody out, it just kind of melted my heart, and I was able to see his thought process is a little different than mine, and that's okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I can agree that his thought process is a little different, especially liking Batman, but that's a whole different conversation.
Oh, Batman's our favorite.
Oh,
My brother would say it's all about is Superman. What's wrong with you?
we all can't just have a utility built, I guess, but okay, I digress. Yeah, no, but I appreciate you sharing that because again, it's how do you recognize? How do you stop in the moment and recognize there's a different way, a different lens? Maybe putting yourself in your kids' shoes because I I could relate to your ex-husband a little bit, doing the laundry, making sure everything's clean, and then now I have to wash 5 extra pairs or however many extra pairs of socks. Why? There's no need. Why? Why would we do that? Why are you doing? And your illustration really shows that it probably was the most innocent reason ever, meaning I'm going to the lake, I want my superhero socks, and I want all of them to come with me because I can't just pick one.
That is the root, though, is to assume the innocence, to assume that the behavior is not malicious, to assume that there is some message. I think that's the root of being able to slow down those reactions and shift the way we look at it. When we don't assume that the intent is malicious, right? Like that's the goal.
Yeah. And you can apply that to a lot of different, relationships. Parenting, I think, is just one of them. So,
Like all of it,
yeah,
right?
all of it is. Well, thank you, Jamie. I think this has been really fun. I appreciate you being as open as you have been about your parenting journey and the styles and how your family dynamic is created and shaped. And I do appreciate kind of being able to mirror my parenting against it, just to kind of see, compare and contrast between the two. And there's some similarities, obviously, but there's some things that we do a little bit differently. And I've learned a little bit today because of that. So thanks again.
Yeah. Well, it's also been good to reflect on. This has been a little therapeutic for me the day after my beautiful young one turns 19. So thanks for taking me back a bit and
Well,
helping me
and thank you to our listener
just
for suggesting that for us. So.
Yeah. Yes. So, um, I think that wraps us up for this episode of Roundtable Mindset.
I think you're right. Well, you have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time on the Roundtable Mindset.
Bye bye. This podcast was recorded and edited by Jamie and Mahlon, with music by Famous Cats. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please email us at roundtablemindset@gmail.com. And never miss a new episode by making sure you like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you enjoyed your time with us today, do us a favor and invite a friend. Thanks for listening. Please join us next time at the round table, and remember, your opinion and perspective matter, and we might not see eye to eye, but that's okay.